Today we're going to talk about basics and skills. So let's spend a couple of minutes talking about getting your comfort level down with speaking to prospects. Here's what you have to understand is the average real estate agent is going to sell about 3 homes in Metro Atlanta per year. Okay, and what that means to me is that the average agent is not making a living, right? I think both of you and all of you out there would like to sell more than 2 or 3 homes a year. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay, because when you sell 2 or 3 homes a year, you're making less than 10 grand probably.
Wow.
Okay, by the time everyone is paid, tax man, all that stuff. So here's the thing, the average real estate agent doesn't have a clue what they're doing. Okay, they're not market experts, they're not contract experts, they're not inventory experts, they don't have anything, they're not refining their skills on negotiation. And because that's how they are, quite honestly, it's obvious, right? If you were to call me and I knew that you were the agent on the other side of the table, I would have a pretty good idea, not to mention the fact that I can look at your license number and see you're relatively new. But as an experienced agent, I might, kind of test you a little bit to see what type of caliber agent you are, so to speak. And I'm not trying to scare you, this is just the reality, right? So you have to work extra hard at the beginning to learn what you have to learn so that you have the confidence you need to withstand those types of challenges. Make sense?
Right.
Because you could potentially get challenged from the other agent. You could potentially get challenged from your prospects, right? Your clients, your customers. And what we need to make sure is happening is that you have, you're equipped with the skills and the checklist and the processes so you can kind of kill that right away, right? So if you're stumbling all over yourself, I might ask you questions like, so why is the seller moving? And rather than saying they got a job transfer, you say, well, they got a job transfer, blah, 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 and out come the floodgates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say something that, whether you realize it or not, is compromising your seller's negotiation power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, well, they already bought a home. Well, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, well, they're going to take the proceeds from this home and go buy a cabin in the woods. Well, that means they have a lot of proceeds, and I could probably chip away at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be really careful on what you say. Being vague is okay. Answer the questions they ask you. Volunteer the information that's beneficial to you, and you don't have to volunteer any other information.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes.
I'm not saying have ethical challenges and stuff. I'm just saying, like, answer the question you're asked.
I get that.
Right. Now, I say all that to tell you that by happenstance, the people that are important to you are going to end up with a lousy real estate agent if you don't do something about it. Make sense?
Yes.
So when you have, so there's going to be 2 ways I'm going to teach you how to just do it. One is to have this thought in your mind that says, if I don't let this person know that I spend a lot of time becoming an expert in real estate, and they already know me, trust me, like me, and more than likely would like to support my new adventure, right?
Right.
If I don't say anything, they're going to still have their real estate need. The trouble is they're going to go to a different real estate agent who's not you, and they're the ones that are going to get paid, and more than likely your friend could have gotten a better deal or better terms or had a better experience. It's fair to say?
Fair to say.
So, anytime you're hesitating about your whether you're going to go approach them or not, or whether you're going to say something to them, think about that. Secondly, the more and more you know what to say and how to say it and how to use technology and how to deal with the checklist, and like you understand how a real estate transaction happens from start to finish, the less you'll be worried about approaching them. Because what's happening is subconsciously you're worried to go initiate a conversation because you're worried they're going to ask you a question you don't know the answer to. That's at least part of it, right?
Could be. I mean, I just can't figure it out. I promise promise you, I am not one who doesn't like to have conversations. I can sit here and talk to you for 3 hours. I can run my mouth. I just don't know what causes me to freeze. It's like a mental thing, and I just freeze.
If you can't clarify vocally what it is, then it's deep in there.
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out what it is and why it's there. The other thing is you also are gonna need to spend a little bit of time, and that's why we spent a lot of time last week talking about vision and dreams and plans and these kind of things, is because we need to make sure that we equate you getting what you want, right? Whether it's more money, more time, more flexibility, whatever it is, we need to equate the work you gotta do and the initiation of those conversations with getting what you want, right? So if you don't initiate that conversation, do you think it's gonna be easier or harder to initiate one with a complete stranger?
Probably harder.
Right. So the people that already like you and trust you, I mean, you have probably been an honest, upstanding person your whole life, right?
Correct.
So the people that you've interacted with are people that already want to support you. So those conversations are gonna be easier to have than the ones that you might have with a stranger at the grocery store or something, right? And you might have to overcome more hurdles with the strangers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you what I would think is a relatively easy question. Would you rather have easy conversations or hard conversations?
Okay, that depends.
Okay.
Because sometimes I like hard conversations because I like a little bit of conflict. Sometimes
Okay.
I like talking about politics and things like that that get nasty. But then,
So if you
Yes.
get a thrill in some capacity from having those conversations, then you need to time block in your schedule a certain amount of time to have those types of conversations. So you might say, well, I kind of like to, deal with somebody sassy or deal with somebody that's going to push back a little bit. Great. So every day for X number of minutes, you're calling FISBOs and expireds and people that are going to give you a bunch of pushback. However, if you also get satisfaction from having a nice, pleasant conversation, or working with people that already support you, then you need to time block a certain amount of time each day to have those types of conversations. And that's when you're building up your sphere of influence, when you're collecting the data from them and making sure that they're in your command system properly, tagged and everything.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm not telling you don't have them. I'm not telling you to have them. I'm telling you that if your strengths are a little, if you have some diversity in your strengths, then just dedicate time to each of those things.
Yeah.
Right. However, I do want to let you know that the more conversations you have, the easier they will become. Right. And that is going to come from studying the scripts. Right. From knowing enough about the marketplace to have an intelligent conversation. From knowing when the time comes to put together an offer, what do we do? Right. All that kind of thing. From understanding how to use technology. Right. Some of the concepts we talked about this morning. What is the worst thing that could happen? Like, let's pretend that I'm a friend of yours and you're on the brink of whether you're gonna approach me or not and bring up real estate. We're just having a casual conversation. Like, what's the absolute worst that could happen?
Okay, this is what I hate. Oh, my sister sells real estate, and so I think I'm gonna use her. After we've had a whole conversation about the house and, the market, then at the end of the conversation, so is it something I said during the conversation? Or are they just digging for information from me?
Give me an
Just-
example of a conversation that you've avoided saying it in.
Okay, so I go to this optician and I've been using her for years, and this has happened about 2 weeks ago. So I go in, I'm going in there to get my glasses, not even worried about asking her, does she need to buy a house or anything. I wasn't even thinking that. And I said to her, hey, I saw you driving the other day in Cumming, and you were headed the same way toward where I live. I was like, do you live in Cumming? And she's like, yeah, I live there. She's like, I live in an apartment. I've been thinking about getting a house. And I'm like, how come you haven't, purchased a house? The market's great right now. You can find find a really nice place, it's just you, right? And she said yes, and we're talking, and we get all into about, should I live in Cumming, should I live in Swanee? So we're talking about the differences in price and what she might like for a townhouse versus a single family home. And so toward the end of the conversation, I'm reaching in my bag to give her my card and said, hey, let's get together, let's have lunch, let's talk about it, and let's talk about what your needs really are outside of work. And she says, oh, it would probably be bad because if I had sat and chat with you, because my brother is a realtor too, but he's new. And this is exactly what she said. He's new. He's not experienced like you. And I'm thinking to myself, I never told her I was new though. I never said a word. And she goes, yeah, but I'm so afraid he'll make a mistake because he's new, so I haven't talked to him yet. But it would be bad if I did business with you and I didn't do business with my brother. So I said, well, I'm gonna give you my card anyway, because sometimes it doesn't work out with family, and let's keep in touch.
All right, got 1,000 things to say about that.
Okay.
First of all, do you know why she assumed that you were not new?
No.
Because you had a smart conversation. You were positive, and you weren't stumbling all over yourself when you were having that conversation. So she assumed that you were new. I'm sorry, she assumed that you were not new.
Right.
Okay. Now, if she had, first of all, you're not going to get her to sign paperwork like right then and there.
Right.
And the business card strategy isn't helpful at all.
Okay.
You need to go to her and say, here's an app. You might say, what company does your brother work for?
Okay.
Right, just to keep the conversation going, because if she started off negative almost immediately,
Yes.
she'll probably continue to go negative. So if you say, oh, what company is your brother at? And they're like, oh, he's a blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, yeah, but I heard they're not a good company or something. So yeah. All I can say is that they don't have what I have in terms of technology. Have you seen the new Keller Williams app? Right? Can I get that onto your phone right this second? Right? Because what will end up happening is, first of all, how long was that conversation? 5 minutes?
Well, we went on for a little bit because I was
20
getting my
minutes?
glasses, perhaps.
You were in the seat already.
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't waste any time.
Yeah.
Don't get beat up about the fact that even if you did waste time, it's gonna happen, right? Just get comfortable with having those types of conversations, because the realtor is the life of the party, right? And everyone wants to talk to the real estate agent. But you got something in your hand, the app, that no one else got. So she can start looking at homes through your app. You'll know everything she's doing. And even if she uses her brother, which she already told you she's having some hesitations about, then she'll say, hey brother, do you have this app? And you'll say, no, I'm at Remax, I don't have that app. Say, well, let me talk to your brother about Keller Williams. Next thing you know, he's in your downline, right? So there's opportunity everywhere, right? Your brother, you might say, hey, well, I'll be happy to, your brother can refer the piece of business to me and he can watch everything I do. Right? So your brother can get paid a little bit and I can get paid a little bit, right? Saying, I get it. I would be reluctant to work with somebody that didn't have a lot of experience either. The greatest part about it is I'm in coaching every day. And when I know something, I'll tell you. When I don't know something, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Right? And just always keep it positive. Because this woman is telling you, even if she says, my best friend is a realtor, Kim, there's no chance I'm using you. Say, awesome. Have you ever had a friend that you're not friends with anymore? Me too. Right? A lot of them are over real estate, as a matter of fact. Right? So just always keep it positive, because they don't want to think that every time they have a conversation with you, you're going to bring up real estate, or you're going to be salesy about the fact that you're bringing up real estate.
Right.
So just keep it positive, have a couple nice talking points, and deliver value when given the opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then don't bother with business cards. It ain't going to be helpful. You need something from them.
So
Hey.
how do we even bother to get those anymore?
It's like,
Do we need them?
it's like flyer boxes.
It's custom.
It's just custom.
Customary.
I'd have them.
Okay.
Say, here's a card, but in the meantime, I got this cool app. What's your email address? I'll make sure that you can use it right away.
Okay.
Something like that.
Business cards are for raffles now.
Yeah. Right, for lunch drive.
Is there any way to send them an app, even if I'm just talking to them over the phone? If they're in my contacts
course.
already, how do I send,
You send, it's got a URL and you just text it to them.
okay, awesome. I'm gonna do that
Right.
today, yeah.
So learn all the tools that we got,
Yeah.
so you can start to share them with your people, because they're not overly aggressive tools, they're value. And the idea is that you have to make deposits before you can make withdrawals, right? So if I've never banked at Bank of America, I can't walk into Bank of America and say, hey, I'm Bill, give me some money.
Right.
They're like, who the hell are you?
Right.
Right? But if I go into Wells Fargo and I say, hey, give me some money, they're like, what's your account number? And I got one. And they're like, okay, how much do you want? Right, so I've made a bunch of deposits at Wells Fargo. I've never made a deposit at Bank of America, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right, and so with that in mind, then you gotta say to yourself, how can I be depositing stuff all day with as many people as possible? So when it comes time for payback, I'm the one that's gonna get I'm gonna be the one that receives it.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the way that you're gonna move the needle on what we're talking about here is, number one, to dedicate a certain amount of, dedicate a certain amount of time each day to getting smarter, right? So that's, market, contracts, systems and tools, technology, and then go out there and have a bunch of conversations. The worst thing that could possibly happen, by the way, is that your friend says, Kim, I never really liked you anyway, and there ain't a chance in hell I'm gonna use you as my real estate agent. And you know what? Wouldn't it be nice to know that right now?
Up front, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So even the worst case scenario is gonna be helpful for the growth of your business, right? It's like sometimes when I was making follow-up calls, I just wanted to be like, can you just call me back and tell me to leave you alone? And that there's no chance we'll ever do business.
Yeah.
Because this whole flirting with you crap is driving me crazy.
Yes.
Either buy something or tell me that, to get lost.
Yes.
But at least respond. But I can want that all day long, and I might not get my way. So I just gotta keep pouring into them, giving them stuff, and at some point, I may outlast the other person giving them stuff. Right, so they can be flirting with a couple of real estate agents. If I'm the last man standing, I get the piece of business. And the more you can automate, by the way, and the better our tools, which they're great, the better.
I suck at this tech stuff. I'm sitting there doing the smart plan like you. I'm so lost. So I'm just watching the YouTube videos.
Just watch the
I'm
videos.
just gonna keep watching.
Because they're gonna take this very simple test, and it's gonna help you figure out what are the priorities each day. Okay? Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about you for a second, Tevin. So, what we're talking about here is, setting up, you remember the drawing that we drew this morning? Were you in that?
I wasn't in this morning, no.
Okay, so we talked a lot about this idea of, essentially 3 phases of the business.
Mhm.
The lead generation phase,
Mhm.
the follow-up phase, and the transaction management phase.
Mhm.
So we're kind of in the transaction management phase with you,
Yep.
right? We're in that 7 to 10 week process where, your family member is prepping their home for sale.
Mhm.
Okay, so we need to make sure that we understand, we're essentially creating a big checklist, and a lot of this can be done on command, right? There's 5 different phases in
Mhm.
command for, like prep, active, under contract, pending, these kind of things, right?
Mhm.
And each of those, you can create phases where you can have checklists for each of those things, right? So we have, the home goes under contract, now what?
Mhm.
Okay, that's like the trigger point for, 15 different things that need to happen. Right, we have to send the important dates to everyone, we have to send the contract to the lender, we have to send the contract to the attorney,
Mhm.
we have to, call the buyer or seller and tell them what's happening next.
Mhm.
We need to notify the other agent, we need to call the inspector, we need to call whatever it is, we've got, that trigger event causes a bunch of stuff to happen.
Right.
Now, what are the bunch of stuff, right?
Yes.
So I've passed out at one point in the past, let me actually go grab this really fast.
Okay.
It's a seller checklist, hang on.
Gotcha.
Where's your mom moving to?
Stone Mountain, over where.
Where's she at now?
East Cobb, Marietta.
Oh wow, she's
So-
going all the way on the other side.
That's where, her sisters live over there,
Oh, okay.
so when I move out again, she won't be lonely. That's the plan.
Yeah.
I moved out last year and she was on board now.
Oh gosh.
And she's older, so like driving 45 minutes from there to there
big is the house?
2,400.
It's a single family or a
Mhm.
single house?
It's like one of those 1970s contemporary style things, so tall windows, diamond windows, weird windows.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of them over there in East Cobb. Like, my daughter used to go to school there, so like Waleo Road, back in this
Oh, yeah.
bunch of them back there.
Yeah, there's some quirky ones.
Yep. My daughter had a sleepover at one of them one night, and she's like, "Mom, it's the coolest house ever." So, yeah, it's interesting because young people like those.
Yeah, because they're artsy kind of in a way. They're unique.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a document that I had used for my team. And what we did here was we essentially said, what are the things that we have to do, even the smallest of smallest things, when we are flirting with a seller? Okay, so can I use this real fast?
Yep.
So, what we did was I said if it is in just regular font, this is something that I did. If it's bolded, this is something my assistant did. Okay, and then we had a checklist, and by the way, all this can be put into command now. This is before command. But we had did we do it? Yes or no? What date did we do it? And are there any notes that are relevant here? Right? So we had the address, we had a seller intake sheet, right? So by my phone, I had a sheet of paper that was basically an intake sheet, which is like, name, address, and it had all the pre-qualification questions for a seller.
Yeah.
Right? Tell me the reason why you're moving, when do you have to move by, have you interviewed any other agents, what do you think your home is worth? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your home? Oh, it's a 7. Okay, well, what would make it a 10? Well, if I put hardwood floors in, it would be a 10. If I replaced the windows, it would be a 10. And if I updated my appliances, it would be a 10. Awesome. So that's the stuff that is preventing them from getting what they want. That's essentially what we have to keep in mind.
Right.
Oh, it would be a 10 if it wasn't on this busy street. Okay, well, the reason why we're not getting a lot of showings is because your home's on a busy street. When it's listed for 300, if it was listed for 250, people wouldn't realize it was on a busy street because they wouldn't give a damn because they'd see so much value that they would ignore that. Does that make sense? So I had an intake sheet of all the questions that I was going to ask, so nothing slipped through the crack. Again, this is a system, right? So let me see your pen real fast.
Yep.
So this morning we talked about this idea that we take the process itself, and then we figure out all the little things that have got to occur, right? So that's the model or the system. Then we say, is there a piece of tech that will help me with this? Right? That's command, by the way. What can we automate? What can we put on a checklist? And then the next question is, who does the work? Right? That's where are the people involved here? More than likely, both of you guys will be doing the work, right? Except for the things you automate where command's doing the work, right? So if we go back here, we say, all right, well, after I take the intake, I'm going to do a thank you video. Or whatever you do, this is your business, right? So you get off the phone, you say, hey, it was so great to speak to you. By the way, they might be speaking to other real estate agents because now they're starting to look for properties, or they're starting to inquire about the value of their home, or they're starting to flirt with other agents, right? So as fast as you possibly can, you need to separate yourself from other people, right? From other real estate agents. What do you do that's unique, right? And what value can you deliver that your colleagues cannot deliver, right? So thank you video, let's say. I said, hey, it's so nice to speak with you. Figured you want to see what I look like. Here's a little video. I'm so excited to help you make sure you guys get to Chicago as quickly as can for your husband's new job. Just as I promised, I'll be sending you some listings momentarily, whatever, right? Do you do a little thank you note? Okay, great. So now I type up that information, I send it off through Skype to my assistant so it goes into the database without me having to do it. Since you're a solo agent, you probably have to do that, right? So how do we make sure that data gets into a place where data goes, right? You have to have a standard for how that occurs. Do you do it within 10 minutes? Do you do it at night when all that stuff is, when you can be in your pajamas, right? Do you do it right then and there? What's your standard? How do you do it, right? So I update the database. Then I set the listing appointment. Then I update the client database, right? So when I'm setting the listing appointment, I might learn things that I didn't know previously, so I gotta update the client, I gotta update my contact page, right? I search or research to share with seller, I create a Dropbox file for that client, I create a loop and dot loop, I share the seller's property and community association disclosure and lead disclosure to be completed. Hey guys, here's some of the preliminary disclosure paperwork, just wanted to get these into your hand as quickly as possible. If you have any questions about these, let me know. I'll check back in with you in a couple days to see how you're doing on that, right? I update the seller checklist. I upload or edit the seller info sheet. So I used to have an info sheet that I could pull up, or my assistant could pull up, that had all the vitals for that transaction. So a lot of this stuff ultimately has been built into Command.
Yeah.
So that's like the contact sheet and any type of, things like, what their mortgage amount is, or what their family structure is, these kind of things. Anything I might need to quickly recall, right? This is, again, showing you why tech is so important, right? I would email, Charity was a woman at the law firm I used to do a lot of work with, that would send me the legal descriptions, right? So this could say, email Kern for legal description.
Yep.
Right? Say, hey, I'm talking to the owner at 123 Main Street, the seller's name is Joe Smith, and it's in DeKalb County. Okay, so then they send me the legal description, so I can start to put some of the pieces together behind the scenes, right? I'm getting my file organized, right? I'm sending them a copy of the listing agreement. I'm adding their entry to CTE, which is Commitment to Excellence. It's the system I used to use to track stuff. I uploaded, now I've communicated this, that I'm about to get this listing to my assistant, and she goes into Cole, which you guys now have access to, and creates and then uploads a list of the nearby neighbors, so that I can call them and say, hey, I'm Bill, I'm working with Joe and Sarah, and over on Devonshire, and we're gonna be listing their home next week, and I figured you might know, I'm sure you're not interested in the home, but maybe you know somebody that is, right? Oh, well, I don't know anyone that is. Great, let me ask you a question. When the home goes under contract and when it ultimately sells, it's probably gonna have an impact on your home's value. Would you like me to update you when that stuff happens? Well, sure. Okay, let me make sure I have all your correct information. Boom, now you have somebody new in your database. Oh, no, I don't need any of that information. Interesting. Okay, so who's the real estate agent that you rely on when you have questions? So would it be helpful if you had a resource that you can go to look at the home values and what's selling, what's not selling, look at pictures and all that? Yeah, great, here's my app, right? I'll need your email address, right? It's anything you can offer in exchange for data.
Okay.
All we're trying to get here is data. Does it make sense?
Yes.
And what are you doing? You're showing them, how many calls do you think they've ever gotten like that?
Probably none.
Yeah. And so who do you think they might have as top of mind, or at least maybe invite you in for an interview when it's time for them to sell their home, because they know how hard you're working for your sellers?
Right, and it'll be you.
That's right. And what happens, let's just run a scenario real fast. Let's say you make that phone call and they cuss you out like crazy on the telephone, okay? And you hang up. And then you say, I need a break. And you go to Target. And you're walking around Target doing some shopping or whatever. And there is another person at Target. And they're doing the same thing. And you happen across paths. And you get into a conversation with that person. And it's actually a very pleasant conversation. Is there a chance that was the same person?
Yeah.
Mm.
Good chance.
Right? They don't even know who you are.
Right.
They've never met you. They probably didn't hear your name correctly in the first place. You pissed them off, so they're probably not gonna look you up. Right?
Right.
Yet 5 minutes later, you could be in a completely different setting and they could have a great experience with you. The point is they don't even know who the hell you are. So like the worst case scenario is essentially not even worth discussing, because they're not connecting it with anything. Does that make sense? So there is now no worst case scenario. Now all you're doing is fishing. You catch a fish, great. You don't catch a fish, they never knew who was holding the pole anyway.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the more you can detach yourself emotionally from the ones that don't actually work, the better. Does that make sense? Because then it's just the process. If I do the process, I will have a better likelihood of getting the result. If I find excuses for doing the process or not doing the process, I should say, you're not gonna get the result. Or you're not gonna get as many results. So let me ask you a question. If somebody sells 30 homes a year and somebody else sells 3 homes a year, what do you think? Is the person that sold 30 smart?
Not necessarily, just worked already.
Yeah, I agree. Do you agree? Okay.
But most people would just probably, if you were speaking to a client, they'd probably assume.
Well, the
maybe.
fact of the matter is the person that does 3 is not gonna have as much confidence as the person that does 30. And if I go and sit down with a seller, I know what to say, and I've said it so many times, that I could literally say 2 + 2 is 5, and they'd probably believe me. They're like, oh my gosh, it's been my whole life I thought it was 4, but gosh, you're saying it so confidently, maybe it is 5. Does that make sense? All right. We're gonna review the disclosure with the seller. Did you fill it out properly? Did you have any spelling mistakes? Let me ask you a couple questions, make sure it was completed properly, right? We're gonna upload all the docs to Dropbox. So I was always keeping a simultaneous file in Dropbox, which ultimately became Google Drive, and a Dotloop, right? I was gonna call the photographer, because when I'm ready, I'm ready. I don't want them to have to wait for the photographer.
Right.
So I call the photographer and say, hey, what's your openings this week? I'm probably gonna get a listing. I'm out of town Wednesday through Friday. Okay, great. That dictates a lot of what I need to know, right? So I can push harder or back off of some other part of the experience. Make sense? I need to have the pictures edited. I need to complete the dual entry form and send it to Luke. Luke is my assistant, right? So now I'm going through the home, I've got that dual entry form so I can go in and not have to ask dumb questions later like, where are the attic stairs again? Is the water gas? Is the heat gas? Where, like, are there street lights in the neighborhood? It's like the ones that you guys haven't put in a lot of listings, but you put in the listings and you're like, damn, I forgot to look if there were sidewalks.
Yeah, right.
Right, so you know those questions, and so you're taking notes right there. And then ideally, you put it on a sheet of paper that you can just fax or send off to somebody else when they put the listing in. That makes sense? So you're basically examining every little micro moment of the transaction, so you can remind yourself it has to happen, check it off, and move to the next thing. Okay? I was gonna input the listing into FMLS with pics and doc, and put it into George MLS with pics and docs. Email the form to my seller. Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity, your listing is live. Is there anything on here you don't like? Great, you don't want me to say anything about the porch? Cool, take it off, switch it, right? Proof that you're working. Remember, if you sit down with a seller and you get the paperwork and you price it correctly, and immediately you get an offer, and there's no time for an open house, and there's no time for weekly feedback reports, and 4 weeks later you sit at the closing table and you walk away with 15 grand, they think you're overpaid. Make sense?
Yes.
So what do you have to do? You gotta tell them every time you're doing something. Hey, I just wanna let you know, my assistant just uploaded 500 people that live closest to you, and we're about to go through that list and call people to let them know your home's available. Right? I don't care if you get a contract before you can get through the whole list, now they know. They know you're working. Hey, just finished the flyer, it's uploaded, we uploaded all the disclosures today. We put a campaign through Facebook, through our command system, and we've had 14,000 views, and we set 2 showing appointments, just want you to know. Right, so tell them all the shit you're doing, you gotta tell them, or they think you're overpaid.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we deserve look, there's been closing tables I've sat at where I'm like, I literally have the best job in the world. I am wildly overpaid for this. And I've sat at closing tables where I'm like, what a waste of time, right? And you have to deal with both, right? Okay, update the super key system, so you know like what the CBS code is. Like Michelle was asking about the CBS code yesterday. Like, that's inefficient. Right? Now she'll have an efficient system to identify where the CBS codes are. So now maybe she goes and she says, okay, well, I own 6 lockboxes, they're these labeled, they're these ID numbers, and when I have this one, I know that the CBS code is this, right? And then you can when a termite guy says, what's the CVS code for this lockbox, you go to the info sheet
Yeah.
that says 123 Main Street has this lockbox and this CVS code, right? Or you can send a message to your assistant that says, hey, send the CVS code to Ralph at pest control or whatever, for 123 Main Street, boom. Then it's just removed from your head and put on the desk of somebody else.
Right.
Or you say, okay, am I likely to get this question again? Yes. Let's create a system. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you know what, speaking of lock boxes, what do you do with clients who don't want a lockbox? Because a lot of people don't want lock boxes
Why?
anymore because they're afraid of being robbed. The lock boxes get stolen
How in
then,
the hell is it gonna get stolen?
Let me
They
tell
don't
you,
have your codes.
no, they take them away from the house.
By removing the doorknob?
Okay, so let me tell you, the lady at FMLS sits there and she tells you horror stories, especially the one in Duluth, and she tells agents horror stories about how thieves can get the lockbox off the house now. So who else is she telling that to? Because I'm sure agents, I don't know, are they telling that to their clients? Because some
No.
clients do not want to put
You can
lockboxes out. I just,
I mean, if they stole it, it'd be pretty hard for them to then get the key, especially the super ones.
Well, first of all, they have to get the key. The only way they're getting the key is to know your combo code. And you're not gonna share your combo code with anyone else. That's why you have a CVS code, right?
Right.
Secondly, they time on and off, right? So you can go in and set the time in which it's available to be opened and when it's not available to be opened,
okay.
okay? And I hate to say it this way, but I'm not working with anyone that doesn't want a lockbox in their home unless they own $1 million house. And the fact is because the lockbox is not only a system, but it's technology and allows somebody else to open the door for me. I ain't got time to drive across town to open the door for you every time you want the door unlocked. That's why we put a lockbox on there. It also sends me an immediate notification of who it is, what time they went in, how long they were there for, okay? If you open the door for somebody, I don't have any of that information, right? And if you open the door, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you don't have any of that information either. That's one of the drawbacks of being FISBO, is not only you have to open on the door every single time, which means that you probably shouldn't go on vacation, you probably shouldn't have any fun, etc. Because who knows when you're gonna get the call and you don't wanna turn them down because they may wanna buy your home, right? They have no leverage. We put the lockbox out there, we got leverage. By the way, if you put the one that's like 3 or 4 numbers and it's all manual, that doesn't track anything. So you're gonna give it to the code to somebody who can go rob you. If you got a dishonest real estate agent, their name's all over that thing and they're gonna get busted.
Well, I was just asking because she does give horror stories at the.
Quit listening to that woman, she doesn't sell any real estate. Remember what we told ourselves earlier?
Yes.
Crazy people, we're not listening to them anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna create the flyer, we're gonna create the virtual tour, we're gonna upload it to YouTube, we're gonna do a blog about it, we're gonna do a social media alert, we're gonna door knock the homes, we're gonna call the coal list, we're gonna check in for our feedback, we're gonna give our weekly call to the seller. We're gonna by the way, we're gonna always tell them what's happening next. Here's what's gonna happen next. This is what you wanted me to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's what happens next, because the worst thing you can do for a prospect is not help them understand what's happening next, right? Because your job is to be the calming force in the transaction. If you're not doing your job, meaning keeping them calm, they're freaking out because they got a lot of money at stake and they're boxing their stuff up and they're nervous and there's a lot of other people involved. You got the home inspector, you got the termite guy, you got the lender, you got the attorney. They're sending off all kinds of paperwork to everyone, especially if they're young and don't have a ton of money, they're freaking out. So your job is to keep them calm, right? They're calm when they know what's happening, right? If I was walking you somewhere in the dark and your eyes were closed, I guess it wouldn't matter if you were in the dark if your eyes were closed, but if I didn't tell you what to expect, you'd be pretty frightened, right?
Yes.
If I said, hey, by the way, there's a big puddle of water in front of you in 10 steps, just move a little to the left. And then after that, there's this little crack in the road and I'm gonna hold you and then you're gonna do a little jump, right? You're like, cool, you're with me. But if I don't tell you any of that and you fall through the crack, well, it sucks to be you. Right? It's like, it's as if you didn't have an advisor.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, we're being paid big money to be advisors, right? So we always gotta tell them what's happening next, all right? So, what's happening next is the appraiser's coming out. Now, here's what'll happen with the appraisal. If it comes in great, here's what'll happen. If it doesn't come in great, here are options. I like to tell them all this stuff beforehand, number one, because it proves to them that I know what I'm doing, and then I'm prepared, right? And secondly, that they're in good hands, whether it works out great or it doesn't work out great. Again, I'm the calming force in the transaction. I keep everything calm. Even when shit hits the fan, we don't have to freak out, guys. Okay, backward electrical outlet, it's cool. Guess what? There's a lot of people who know how to fix those things, and they're not expensive. And even if they are, we're gonna ask somebody else to pay for it first. Okay, so just relax. Right?
That's where I'm at too.
What's that?
Gotta keep mom relaxed.
Hey, your mom might not be the ideal client, man. If your mom's crazy, then you may want to refer it.
Oh,
to
she's
somebody.
not crazy, no. Not like that. It's just.
The whole bag bill. Just let it all out.
Here's the thing, Devin.
It's
Is
20
you don't want to invest so much time and energy and heartache into that one transaction.
Oh,
You're gonna
yeah.
have to have a lot of transactions to make this thing go. So your mother's gonna have to, she's gonna have to listen,
Mhm.
right?
She is.
Okay. All right.
And I have Carrie as my reinforcement.
Good.
My outside opinion, because you know, moms don't have to listen to something sometimes.
Yeah, they, that's called, what is it called?
They're like,
Wiping butt syndrome or something like that. Like if somebody if my mom wiped my butt, she doesn't want to talk to me about money.
Yeah.
She doesn't want my money advice because she wiped my butt. She needs to get money advice from somebody different. Okay. We are going to talk a little bit about what to expect next and review what could happen in the next steps. Then we're going to have binding agreement. Okay, great. Binding agreement. Now that's another trigger. Now what happens as a result of that? Okay. Now a bunch of people need the paperwork. We got to update our files. We got to update our systems. We got to share the paperwork. We got to send the deadlines out. We got to change the status in MLS. We got to maybe send them a video. Congratulations. Hey, it's been such a pleasure working with you guys, and we found an awesome buyer. And I'm just so excited to be involved in this process with you. Thank you. I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity. Right? Send it off. Right? We gotta update things. Now we're gonna go back and call the people that we called 3 days ago and say, hey, Joe, you're not gonna believe this. I know we just talked 3 days ago and I told you it's just listed. Guess what? It's already under contract.
Wow.
So, by the way, were there any people that you just went and communicated the fact of this new listing to that maybe I can share some other opportunities with? Guess what? A month later, when it closes, you call them up, Joe, just figured you'd wanna know this house sold for $275. It's the highest sale in the neighborhood in 4 years. You know that impacts the value of your home, so I was just curious, when are you planning on moving? Make sense?
Yep.
Worst case scenario is they say, don't ever call me again. See, very sorry, sir, I hope you have a wonderful life. I'll remove your name from my system immediately. Right? So then we're gonna negotiate repairs, we're gonna do the commission agreement, we're gonna update all of our sources, we're gonna send an email to the lender. So, hey, Kathy, we're under contract, here are the list of important dates. Do you see any problems here? By the way, attaches all the paperwork. Kern, here's a list of important dates, here's a new client file for you, it's closing on April 2nd. Do you see any problems here? Right? Here's everyone's contact information for your use. Here's the seller's information, here's the buyer's information that I know of, here is the other agent's information, here's my information. Thank you. Right? Again, these are all systems, right? So you can create canned responses for these things.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
On Gmail, there's canned responses where you can go in and say, hey, client's under contract, right? And you have a little list of all the things you got to do, right? Seller information sheet, appraisal and financing contingency, check in with the STIPs, right? So every day I was getting an email from my assistant that basically said, okay, client file number 1 is this and this and this is next, 2, this and this and this is next, 3, this and this and this is next, right? Okay, we're working on the financing contingency here, the appraisal contingency here, I gotta drop this on in the lockbox here. And I was staring at this because these are the most critical things right now that I need to tend to for each of these client files. And then throughout the day, we're checking things off here, and she just goes down the list. Okay, we did 2 things today for the Smith file. What are the next 2 things? Right? And then we have we have a calendar of like all the important dates. So on Monday, I don't want you to tell me the appraisal contingency is due Friday on Friday morning. I need to know that Monday. So every Monday, the system is to look at the calendar to see what important dates I need to be tracking this week. Right. Remember that we are in business. So much of our business is setting up the systems, right? Check in with the steps. 5 days before the closing, you're gonna send me a copy of all of the receipts saying that the backward electrical outlets were fixed. Did you do it? Because guess what? If you drop the ball on some of that stuff, you could be in default, your client could be in default of the contract, and some of these contracts are waiting for a default so they could sell it to somebody different. So don't let that stuff happen, right? Go to the closing, photo at closing, right? So when my assistant knew I had a closing on Tuesday, she'd send me a message Tuesday morning that says, don't forget to take the picture. Closing was at 2 o'clock, so she'd message me right at, 11:45, right before she was leaving for the day, and said, Bill, you probably already forgot that you need to take a picture today, but don't take a picture. Or don't forget to take a picture.
Right.
Are you clear? Yeah. No, seriously, you're probably gonna forget. I'm just here to remind you again, because I've worked with you for a long time, and I know how you work. Make sense?
Right.
Once the deal's closed, did I do all my final paperwork for the office? Right? Did I upload the new client file to Google? So now they own a different address. Did I put their new address in the system? Have I updated that? Right? Somebody gets divorced, split them off. Right? Somebody passes away, get their name off there. That's the worst thing you could do is send, hey, Joe and Mary just died, okay, Joe. Right? You gotta always be gathering that data. Then I maybe send a little video to congratulate them. Do I do a handwritten note? Right? Do I send out a survey? Do I send a handwritten note to the co-op agent? I was writing testimonials for the other agent just to do something different. Hey, I just really appreciate, I know it was a little stressful around that appraisal contingency, and I just really appreciate all that you did to keep the deal together. Your professionalism was top notch, right? So now they have something in their binder that says, hey my gosh, look at my letter. I'm not only getting reviews from clients, I'm getting reviews from other agents. I'm easy to work with. Don't you want to work with an agent who's easy to work with? Right? So again, you're just creating a bunch of stuff that it's tasks, it's stuff that's gonna get done, but it's what's most important is it's separating you from the rest of everyone else. Right? Did I get a testimonial? Did I upload it? Did I move the file to the closed section in Dropbox? Right? Did I call the seller a week later and say, hey, how'd the move-in go? Or do I call the other agent and say, hey, I know we were really hectic during the transactions, but I'd love to get hear more about you and your business. How about I take you to coffee? Next thing you know, they're bitching about something that they're not doing or they're not getting or no system that they haven't created. And you say, well, gosh, I've got a problem. I got KW Command. Well, what's KW Command? You should talk to Aubrey. Next thing you know, they're in your downline. So the takeaway here is that I want to make sure that you guys understand that everything that you're going to do more than once is a system. And so you need to have a list just like this that says, what are the standards of my business? The coolest thing is I can bring in a new assistant and say, everything in bold's your job. Do you like this? Do you want this job? Yes or no?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if they say, no, I don't want this job, then your checklist out of date. Say, well, can I pay you to update the checklist? You want that job?
We can put this checklist in command just like this, though.
Yep, you can create tasks under each phase in the opportunities section.
I saw that, I just didn't know we could put all, this many.
Do whatever you want. It's completely customizable.
Go crazy.
But that may be more than you want to do, maybe less than you want to do. Right?
It all seems important, so.
So think about this, is you are gonna have to quickly express your value to your prospects as quickly as they can so that they quit looking for real estate agents and they commit to working with you. That make sense?
Yes. Or wanting to use their new brother.
What's that?
Said or wanting to use their brother who's a new agent. Yeah.
You know what? I would just say something like, are you planning to interview any other agents before you make your decision? And she's like, maybe I when you put doubt into people's minds,
Mm-hmm.
it stays there. They can't unhear that, right? It's like, let's say that I am, I've met the woman of my dreams, and we get engaged in like a week. And my friend's like, a week? Like, have you seen this person in financial stress before? Have you seen this person drunk before? Like, have you seen this person under a high degree of stress? Like, have you ever met their parents? Like, do you know anything about their childhood? Oh, no. Right. Oh, I'm in love. We hit it off. Everything's perfect. But now I can't unhear the fact that my buddy just said, maybe I should look into her childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should meet her parents and see if they're cases or not. Right? I'm not saying that means that the girl's not worthy. I'm just saying the more data you have, the more sophisticated of a judgment you're going to make.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes.
Is that all that's helpful?
Yeah.
The main thing is you're running a business. Your client. What if your client said, "Hey Kim, I'm just gonna, before I consider hiring you to for the job of helping me sell my house, I just want to come in and watch you execute your seller system."
That's interesting. Have you had someone say that to you?
No. What if they did? Right?
Yeah.
Like Marie jokingly said, "Oh, I want to be your real estate agent. I know you're selling your house." I said, "I know you don't have a 401, so you're not hired." Right? Because I want to make sure my client knows how to tell the difference between her goals and somebody else's goals.
Right.
And I want to make sure my real estate agent understands priority and says no to the right stuff and says yes to the right stuff. And I'm hard to impress, right?
Yes.
And so if you come in and you're unimpressive, you ain't getting the gig. Does it make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
And so you want to make sure that you can impress people who are getting wonderful service, right? And I've said this a couple times, you're not just competing with other real estate agents. You're competing with people that are providing all types of different services. Right? So let's say, for example, you are a cyclist and something's wrong with the chain of your bike, and you take it into the bike repair shop and it's like a flawless experience. It's like, oh, it's just, I'll have to look at it, I'll call you when I fix it. 10 minutes later, you're on your way back home or whatever. And like, oh, it's just this little thing on the chain. I went ahead and fixed it, but I know you're probably busy, so I'll just drop it off at your work. Would that be okay? You're like, yeah, that would be awesome. Well, that just created an unbelievable experience for that person. And whether you realize it or not, or whether they realize it or not, they expect the same caliber service from all of their service providers. So you go in there and you deliver a B- presentation and you're not organized and you're skipping steps and you're leaving stuff undone, they're unimpressed.
Right.
Make sense?
Right.
So every day you should be creating more and more systems, automate them, and start executing on them so you can put the people through the assembly line process. Make sense?
Yes.
Because you're seller number 1 today, you're going through this process. Seller number 15 in 3 months, you're going through the same process. When I realize something, I'm doing it and working, take it out. When I realize, I heard there was something that a lot of people are doing with a lot of success, put it in. Okay, it's in there now, who does the work? Is it bold, not bold, who does it? Make sense?
Yes. Makes sense.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.